welcome to Saucy Cat. My name's Zoe, and one of my favorite things to cook with is tofu. It is such a fun ingredient that has so much potential in so many recipes and cooking styles. However, I know it can be a bit intimidating, and you probably have a lot of questions about this fun little brick, from what it is to how to cook it and everything in between. Now, I'm no expert, but I have messed with tofu enough over the years that I feel I have a decent amount of knowledge to be able to share with you and hopefully help you figure it all out. So without further ado, here is my official Saucy Cat guide on tofu. Let's get into it. So what even is tofu? Tofu is a soybean product that originated in China and is now commonplace in many Eastern countries. It has increased in popularity in other parts of the world due to its versatility and is really common in a lot of vegetarian dishes. To summarize the tofu making process, it is pretty much just soy milk that's been condensed and formed into the shape of a brick. You can loosely compare it to how milk is turned into cheese. Now, I like to call it an edible sponge because it really soaks up the flavors around it. There are two main styles of tofu, those being the silken type and the block style. Silken tofu is made by allowing the soy milk to solidify on its own, causing a really creamy, smooth texture. Block tofu, on the other hand, is made more directly, causing soy curds to develop, and then those soy curds are then pressed together further, causing a coarser, more porous texture. Tofu comes in varying degrees of firmness, which is based on how much water is still present in the block. Soft tofu is, shockingly, the softest form, and it is incredibly moist and fragile. It doesn't take much for it to break, and it has a very soft and smooth texture. Firm is kind of the middle area. It is stronger than soft, allowing it to be handled much more easily, but is not as strong as extra firm. Extra firm is super compact and retains its shape when thrown around in a pan. However, it's not quite as strong as my personal favorite, super firm. Super firm is really solid with hardly any liquid left in it. It is great for nugget-style dishes and lo meins and stands well on its own. Tofu is an amazing source of protein and can be found in a lot of different dishes, from being a filling to smoothies and dips, to being a good meat substitute in heartier dishes. However, different types of tofu have different uses, depending on what kind of dish you're making. Soft and silken tofus, for example, are often used in smoothies and desserts for their light and smooth texture, and also do well in soups and stews that allow them to mingle with the stock and the other ingredients. Firmer tofus can also be used that way, but they really shine in recipes that call for solid munchies. Stir fries, nuggets and strips, toppings for ramen and pizzas. They can even be used as a replacement for scrambled eggs. Depending on the dish you're making, tofu preparation can vary. For example, soft and silken tofu don't really need much preparation, as you just cut, chop, blend, whatever you do with it. Whereas firmer tofus tend to have a bit more preparation that they need. Step one for that would be draining. Tofu is packaged with water to help keep it fresh and moist. However, we're going to want to remove as much water as we can from the tofu to help make it easier to cook later on. And there are a couple methods in order to do that. Method one is to simply pat it dry with paper towels or a lint-free towel. This method is good for if you're low on time or just feeling a bit lazy. However, it is not as effective as our other methods, so I highly recommend one of the others if you have the time. Method two is the most common method, pressing the tofu. Line the top and bottom of the tofu with paper towels and sandwich the tofu between two plates. Now weigh the tofu down with books, pans, other plates, whatever you have that's heavy. I usually leave that pressing for about 2 hours. Another way of pressing is to purchase a tofu press. There are different models out there, but they all achieve the same thing of pressing the tofu down and getting out as much water as possible. A tofu press saves a lot of time by only pressing the tofu for about 15 to 20 minutes. Just tighten the press little by little until it's pressed to your liking. Method 3 is microwaving. When you microwave the tofu, the pores inside the tofu expand and release the water. Not only is this a quick and easy way to drain out the water, but the expanded pores allow sauces and marinades to easily soak into the tofu. Method 4 is my preferred method, freezing. While freezing the full block is fine, I like to cut the tofu into whatever size cubes I want to use them for first. A little planning is needed, as it's best to freeze the tofu overnight and then let it thaw in the fridge. Freezing the tofu achieves the same expanding pore effect as the microwave method, and I often combine the two by first freezing the tofu and then thawing it in the microwave. A tip for both the microwave and freezing methods, while the water is more willing to drain out, you might still need to give it some help. I either gently press the tofu through a plastic strainer or press it between a paper towel. Cutting tofu is pretty straightforward, just keep in mind what you plan on using it for. For example, smaller pieces work better for marinades as it allows the marinade to soak all the way through. Thinner pieces will fry and crisp up better. And then thick pieces tend to stay nice and soft in the middle while crisping on the edges. So just think about what you're planning on using the tofu for and cut it accordingly. Tofu itself doesn't have much flavor to it. Now this is fine if you're planning on adding some sauce to it or letting it soak up the flavors of the surrounding dish. However, if you plan on having the tofu on its own or just want it to pop in some way, then marinating is the way to go. I said before that tofu acts like a sponge, so it doesn't have to marinate long to get tons of flavor. I typically only marinate tofu for 15 minutes to a half hour. Just put the tofu in your preferred marinade into a container with a tight lid. Give it a gentle shake to coat the tofu and let it marinate. Make sure you rotate or flip the container so all tofu chunks get a chance to soak. And here's a tip for you. Drain the marinade out before cooking. You don't have to press the tofu again, but maybe just pat it dry if it's really wet. Tofu can be eaten raw, but if you're at this step, that's probably not what you're using it for. Now there are many ways to cook tofu, so I'm just going to show you some of my methods. Simply add a little oil to the pan, heat it up, and dump the tofu in. Stir fry for about 10 minutes on both sides until the tofu is a golden brown. This is great for stir fries and lo meins. Deep frying tofu works better if you do not marinate it first, as the extra liquid can splatter with the oil. I recommend coating the tofu in cornstarch to give the tofu a solid outside and chewy inside. We usually put both the tofu and cornstarch into a bowl with a lid and gently shake it until it's all coated. Add the tofu carefully into the hot oil and flip it after about 4 minutes. Take out after another 4 minutes and set on some paper towels. A hot tip for you, after it cools, fry it again for another 3 minutes on both sides. This gives it a great crunch on the outside while staying soft on the inside. Deep fried tofu works at achieving that classic Chinese takeout vibe, but can be a bit unhealthy. Check out the next methods to solve that. Baking tofu stiffens the edges and gives the tofu a great crunch. Simply lay the pieces flat on a baking sheet and bake at 350 degrees. Smaller pieces need about 20 minutes, whereas bigger, thicker pieces will need a bit longer. Baked tofu doesn't fall apart as it can with frying, so it's great for nuggets and fries or for adding to soups or used as toppings. Air fryers are becoming more and more common, and yes, tofu can totally be cooked in them. I usually set mine to 400 and leave the tofu in for about 20 minutes, giving it the occasional shake. Tofu can be a really weird thing to interact with if you've never had it before. I was really intimidated when I first tried it out, and it took me a couple months before I really knew what I was doing with it. If you're feeling similar, then I have a couple tips that might help you out. Some of the best tofu I've ever had is from one of our local Chinese spots. If you've never had tofu and really want to try it out but don't know where to start, then I highly recommend ordering it out. See if one of your favorite restaurants has a tofu substitute, or there's even some great frozen tofu options out there just to give you an idea of what it even is. The first time I had tofu, I was not impressed. It was a really soft tofu and the stir fry I was eating was just not a good fit for it. And it took me a really long time before I was willing to try tofu again, but once I did, I realized that the firmer tofus were a lot better for that style of dish. So if you're ever just unsure, try different kinds, different recipes with different styles of tofu, and just see what works and what doesn't. Yes, tofu can be a great substitute for meat in many dishes, but it is not limited to that, and it should not be treated as such. A tofu nugget will not look or taste like a chicken nugget, and if you expect it to, you're going to be disappointed. See tofu for what it is, as its own versatile ingredient that can be used for many things more than just a meat substitute, and then, who knows, you might like it. Tofu has become one of my favorite ingredients to use in many of my recipes, and hopefully I've been able to take what I've learned over the years to help you all in your own tofu journey. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know down in the comments section and we can get a conversation going. If you want to see any more tofu recipes, then like and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time on Saucy Cat. Tofu can be a really weird thing to interact with if you've never had it before. Hello.